Hey guys, I'm Kelly from Kelly's Unexplained, and I'm here with Parachills to bring you a true crime story about the one and only Jack the Ripper. Let's get started.
Every single day, I'm gonna make something great. That's my way. Every single day, I'm gonna make something great. That's my way.
We're going to begin our story in 1888 in London, England. There's a lot of immigration from Ireland and Jewish immigration because they were looking for jobs that the Industrial Revolution promised. A lot of these jobs were factory jobs, so you had a high population coming in at a quick rate. High population in a small area, which in turn causes high crime. With a high crime rate, the issue of murder and prostitution and theft skyrockets. This time in 1888, there was not a solid foundation for profiling crimes and criminals, especially serial killers. Now we're going to dive into the backstory of Jack the Ripper and who he was and kind of get an idea or a reason why he did what he did. Warning, the following presentation contains descriptions of graphic violence against women. Viewer discretion is advised.
There is a name that has been remembered for decades. A name that still gives you nightmares. The name is Jack the Ripper. He is the most notorious serial killer of all time, and perhaps one of the most infamous cult figures in history. The individual, or should I say monster, responsible for the horrifying yet ghastly murders that were committed in the late 19th century remains unknown to this day. For over 100 years, professional and amateur sleuths alike have tried to piece together this unsolved mystery, and yet no one has been able to answer the questions who or why. What sort of person would be capable of committing such horrible acts? And why did they target such poor, disadvantaged women? The legend of Jack the Ripper and his evil deeds is both terrifying yet fascinating to this day. The Autumn of Terror, 1888, endures as one of the most storied whodunits of all time. Jack the Ripper is yet a Poseidon given to a serial killer who lurked in the districts of London's East End in the autumn of 1888. But yet the nickname was derived from a letter written at the time of the killings by someone who claimed to be the murderer. Although there had been many suspects in the case and theories discussed, the actual identity of the killer and the motives behind the grisly crimes are unknown even to this day. It is unclear as to what fueled his savage bloodlust, but the murders all seem to be methodical and calculating. But the precise number of Ripper victims is not definite, but it is generally accepted he killed 5 women. His victims' throats were cut, often followed by abdominal mutilations. Based upon the precision of his cuts, it is assumed by many that the Ripper had anatomical or surgical knowledge. Jack the Ripper was bent on making a name for himself by leaving his grisly handiwork in plain sight. All of his victims were killed where they were found, most of them horribly mutilated to varying degrees. The nature of the crimes and the Ripper's ability to escape the scene undetected made for quite the Victorian-era media frenzy. The Ripper had successfully cast a veil of terror over an entire city and achieved worldwide infamy by word of his devilish deeds. Although there was a series of 11 Whitechapel murders that spanned from April 1888 to February 1891, it is believed that the Ripper's reign of terror began on August 31st, 1888, with the murder of Mary Ann Nichols, and ended with the ferocious slaying of Mary Jane Kelly on November 9th, 1888. There are many theories concerning what prompted the killer to cease his actions. Some believe it was due to the Ripper's sudden death, incarceration, or perhaps admittance to an insane asylum. Others feel his killing spree was precisely charted out and he had eventually completed his course. Thousands of people were interviewed, hundreds were investigated, and 80 people detained during and after the time of the murders. The trial of the Ripper had been closely followed by multiple police forces, including Scotland Yard, as well as a citizen-formed vigilante committee. Among the highly suspect were butchers, slaughterers, surgeons, and physicians, this being due to their knowledge of anatomy. In the end, everyone interviewed provided sufficient alibis, which is why no one was ever officially accused or convicted. Much of the evidence in the case of Jack the Ripper was lost over the years, along with many of the facts pertaining to the murders being more based upon opinion than anything else. The legend of Jack the Ripper is therefore a combination of historical evidence, documented research, and folklore. It is because of this that the story of the Ripper has become something much more than an unsolved series of crimes. Over the years, Jack the Ripper has almost become a supernatural figure, and perhaps the most mystifying and enigmatic criminal of all time. But we have to wonder, who was Jack before this? Who was Jack before he came the devil in disguise? We have to look at the possibilities that he could just have been a normal man, perhaps a family man with a wife and children. Perhaps he had a highly paid job, a skilled job, one where he was respected. So it begs the question, what tipped Jack the Ripper to the dark side? What tipped him over the edge? What drew him to the bloodlust? Only those questions he can answer now. Perhaps when it is our time to leave this mortal realm, we may get to meet the infamous man himself and ask him those questions. We know that Jack the Ripper had sent a series of letters, the most famous one being the Dear Boss letter, which was dated September 25th and was received by the Central News Agency on September 27th, 1888, the same day as its postmark. I'll read out the letter that was sent and see if you can decipher who or what kind of mind frame he could have been in. Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. They joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work was the last job. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went like thick glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Haha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers, just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before. I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. Make of it what you will, but this was not the first of Jack's writing. Jack even sent a postcard, which stated, I was not coding, dear old boss, when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow's double event. This time, number one squealed a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Had not got time to get ears off for the police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper. But one of the most disturbing letters is infamously known as the From Hell letter. Mr. Luck, saw. I send you half the kidney I took from one of the women. Preserved it for you. Other piece I fried and ate it. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out, if you only wait a while longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk. So it begs the question, Jack the Ripper, at the time of these letters, was truly in a mindset of evil, pure evil, a devil in disguise. And it begged the question back then, when or how will the Ripper strike again?
That's creepy. Our focus now is going to turn to the victims. Now referred to as the Canonical Five, historians believe that he's actually responsible for killing up to 11 women. All 5 of these women were prostitutes. Most women in the Whitechapel district of London at this time had to turn to prostitution as a way of survival. 1888, literacy rates were improving drastically. So as the newspaper was covering these ghastly stories, more people had access to the newspaper and were able to read and were getting the information firsthand. Was not happy at how the police handled this crime. They feel like they had done their best to solve this case, to try to track him down. They felt fear for themselves just walking down the street because they had no idea who this was. Let's jump into the timeline and into the victims themselves. August 31st, 1888. At 3:40 a.m., the body of Mary Ann Nichols was found at Bucks Row in Whitechapel. The body was found by a man named Charles Cross. Charles claims he was walking along Bucks Row when he noticed a bundle towards the western end. Another man named Robert Paul approached the body with Cross. The police would eventually arrive at the scene. Mary Ann Nichols was found on her back, her throat was severely slashed, and she was disemboweled. It was determined that she had only been dead for about a half an hour, meaning the killer was most likely nearby when Cross found the body. On September 8, 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was found at 29 Hanbury Street. Her body was discovered by a man named John Davis, an elderly resident of the 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat was slashed, but this time the violence escalated in that the murderer took her womb. The lead investigator at the time proposed the idea that the killer had anatomical knowledge by the manner in which Annie Chapman's wound was removed. Only a surgeon would know how to do that. Later that month, on September 27, 1888, the Central News Agency received the Dear Boss letter, as mentioned before. The newspaper didn't publish it until October 1st, but many believed that it was a fake. Now, as soon as the public got word of this and was able to read the letters, the nickname stuck, Jack the Ripper. So 3 days later, on September 30th at 1 o'clock in the morning, the body of Elizabeth Stride was found on Berner Street by a man named Louis Demschutz. Her throat was slashed, which led police to believe he was interrupted because he didn't have time to disembowel her like his other victims. It was determined that she'd only been dead for about 30 minutes. This dude works fast. What's crazy is just 45 minutes later, another body was found in Mitre Square, just a few blocks west of the last murder. This woman's name was Catherine Eddowes, and she was the second victim in the same night. Her body was severely mutilated, including her face, and her uterus was removed as well as her left kidney. A break came in the case at this time. A piece of Catherine's apron was found east of the murder, which means it was back towards the first murder of the night. And at the scene, this quote was written on the wall. This means the killer knowingly went back to the crime scene, swarming with cops. This shows that he was evasive and lived in the area. This could have been the motive in entering a dangerous situation. At this point, the police station receives a postcard written by someone who claims to be Jack the Ripper. The handwriting is similar. The letter says, "I was not codding, dear old boss, when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number one squealed a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Had not time to get her ears off for police. Thanks for keeping the last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper." On November 9th, 1888, the body of the fifth canonical victim was Mary Kelly. She was found on 13 Miller's Court in her bed by her landlord's assistant, who was seeking rent. This was by far the most gruesome, as her body was disemboweled and, quote, virtually skinned down. So with that, we arrive at the 5 canonical victims. But as stated before, there is 11 to be believed murdered. With this reign of terror, the question is, did anyone see who this guy was? There was actually a few people that did say that they saw him, and the description is, he was between 25 and 35 years old. He was roughly 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", stocky with a fair complexion and a mustache. He was seen wearing a dark overcoat and a dark hat. 5'5" to 5'6". You've got Napoleon syndrome. You do. It takes a real man who's 5'5" to kill women. Dude, this dude needs his ass kicked. Now we're going to look at the hauntings of the locations that some of these murders took place. And they have no idea whether it would be Jack the Ripper or some of the victims. So here we go. Let's check this out.
The Hauntings of Jack the Ripper. The 10 Bells Pub, Commercial Street E1. Jack the Ripper's local. The 10 Bells Pub is undeniably linked with the legend Jack. Its interior resplendent with a magnificent tiled wall panel depicting the days when this area was countryside outside the city of London has hardly changed since the early hours of November 9th, 1888, when Mary Kelly, the Ripper's final victim, left the pub. Her horrifically mutilated body was discovered next morning in Miller's Court of Dorset Street, on the opposite side of the road from the 10 Bells. Indeed, for many years in the 1970s and 80s, the pub was renamed the Jack the Ripper until, thanks largely to a landlord who was tastefully selling dark red Ripper Tipples, the brewery decided to return it to its original name in 1989. In the late 1990s, live-in staff whose bedrooms were on the upper floors of the building were complaining of alarming encounters with a ghostly old man dressed in Victorian clothing. They would often be awoken by an uneasy feeling in the dead of night, and turning over, finding his phantom form lying beside them on the bed. No sooner would they cry out in shock than the figure would disappear. Staff with no previous knowledge of his ghost would often report seeing him, and their descriptions would always be the same. Nobody had any idea who he was, and those who had, on occasion, to live on the premises learnt to just accept him as the oldest resident. In June 2000, however, a new landlord took over the pub and decided to clear out the cellar. He found an old metal box hidden away in the corner, and upon opening it, discovered it contained the personal effects of a man named George Roberts. The items dated from the early 1900s, and with them was a brown leather wallet. Inside was a press cutting of the same period that talked of his having been murdered with an axe in a Swansea cinema. Further research revealed that a man named George Roberts had indeed kept the pub in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the landlord concluded that it was his ghost whom staff had been encountering. A tenant who lived on the premises in 2001 would often hear footsteps, followed by a faint peal of laughter outside his door, even when he was the only person on the premises. Whenever he went to investigate, he would find the corridor outside empty. Going down into the bar to investigate further, he would often be pushed hard on the back by an invisible hand. A psychic was once brought into the pub to see what she could pick up on the premises. Having reached the top floor, she paused outside one of the rooms and refused to go any further. She said that she could sense that something terrible had happened in that room, and was almost certain that it involved the brutal death of a baby in the 19th century. Lindsay Cerveta, a leading researcher and expert on the Jack the Ripper crimes, was shown around the pub a few years later and had been allowed access to the roof space. She noticed some material embedded on the floor behind the water tank, and pulling at it, found it was a sack tied at the top. Opening it, she found it contained a mouldy set of Victorian baby clothes that appeared to have been slashed with a knife. Intriguingly, the tank was directly over the room that the psychic had refused to enter. Westminster Bridge SW1. The ghostly leap of Jack the Ripper. If you stand on Westminster Bridge on December 31st and look eastwards as midnight approaches, you may well be rewarded with a sighting of the ghost of one of London's most infamous criminals. For there is a local tradition. As the first chimes of Big Ben usher in the new year, a shadowy figure will suddenly materialize on the parapet and leap headlong into the murky waters of the Thames below. Legend maintains that this is the hour when in 1888, Jack himself killed himself by plunging into the river from this spot, and that every year since his wrath has been condemned to repeat his descent into infamy over and over again. Should a festive visit be out of the question, on misty autumn mornings, a spectral barge has been known to drift towards the bridge, pass beneath it, but vanish before reaching the other side. Mitre Square, EC3. A poignant wrath. Mitre Square is now surrounded on three sides of modern office blocks and bordered on its south side by the Sir John Cass Foundation School. Nothing remains of the Victorian Square, save its cobblestones across which people hurry on their way to and from work, many not given a thought that they are walking over the spot where one of London's most infamous crimes occurred. For it was in the southwest corner of Mitre Square that the horribly mutated body of Catherine Eddowes, the fourth victim of the murderer whom history remembers simply as Jack the Ripper, was discovered at 1:45 a.m. on 30th of September 1888. Local tradition maintains that on the anniversary of the killing, people have occasionally glimpsed Catherine's spectral figure lying upon the spot where her life came to such a tragic and gruesome end. Hanby Street, E1, Jack the Ripper's second victim. The north side of Hanbury Street is now covered by the sprawling mass of the buildings that were formerly the Truman Brewery. It was built on the side of number 29 Hanbury Street, in the backyard of which at around 6 a.m. on the 8th of September 1888, the body of Annie Chapman, Jack the Ripper's second victim, was discovered. In the days of the brewery, it was often noticed that a strange chill drifted through the ballroom at 6 a.m. on the anniversary of the murder, and it was also reported that Annie Chapman's ghost was sometimes seen standing by the wall of the storeroom that occupied where she died. So we have to wonder, is Jack the Ripper destined to repeat his gruesome crimes over and over again in the afterlife as punishment? Or is he simply torturing his victims beyond this mortal realm? Only time will tell when we cross over to the other side, when we finally learn the truth about Jack the Ripper.
For the victims, the women, I'm sorry they didn't find him. You deserve better. You deserve peace. You deserve answers for you and your family. Have a museum for this guy. You shouldn't have one. It should be about the women. The women deserve a museum, not you. I mean, that is just ass backwards. There's your story about Jack the Ripper. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fun collaboration indeed. And to all my friends in the UK, I see you. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to Parachills and Kelly's Unexplained. And hit that little bell button so you know exactly when we upload and you won't miss a thing. I love you guys. Bye.